What if the space race had been won by the Soviet Union? The space race was one of the defining battles of the Cold War, an ideological and technological contest between the United States and the Soviet Union. For the first decade, the Soviet Union appeared to lead the way, launching the first satellite, Sputnik, 1957, and sending the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into space in 1961. But by 1969, the tide had turned. The United States claimed a major victory, landing Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon. This historic triumph became a symbol of American technological and cultural dominance for decades to come. However, imagine if history had played out differently. What if the space race had been won by the Soviet Union instead? Let's reimagine this pivotal moment in history and explore the alternate world it might have created. What political, technological, and cultural ripple effects might have reshaped the trajectory of human history? In our timeline, the Soviet Union achieved several firsts in space exploration. But their efforts to win the moon race faltered due to setbacks in funding, rocket design, and internal bureaucracy. But what if the Soviets had solved these problems? Picture this. 1969 arrives, and instead of the US flag, the hammer and sickle is planted on the lunar surface. This victory would have been far more than just a technological achievement. It would have been a propaganda coup for socialism and the USSR. The spectacle of a cosmonaut stepping onto the moon, broadcast worldwide, might have dramatically shifted the global perception of which superpower was the true leader in science and progress. For millions, it would signal that the Soviet model, centered on collectivism and state planning, had triumphed over Western capitalism. A Soviet victory in the space race would have fundamentally altered the balance of power during the Cold War. In the real-world timeline, the moon landing provided the United States with a psychological and ideological edge. It displayed the might of American innovation and reinforced the global narrative of Western superiority. Without this success, the United States may have struggled to project the same level of authority. The USSR's win would embolden their allies in the Warsaw Pact and might have drawn more unaligned countries toward their sphere of influence. Soviet dominance on the moon could symbolize a broader supremacy, helping them outmaneuver the US in diplomatic and trade negotiations. Countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, teetering between Cold War alliances, may have been swayed by the spectacle of a Soviet space success. Could this have sped up the spread of socialism? Perhaps. The Soviet Union's newfound prestige might have inspired revolutions and uprisings across the globe, strengthening their ideological battle against Western capitalism. On the other hand, the US, feeling cornered, might have taken more aggressive stances, escalating the conflicts in Vietnam, Cuba, or other critical flashpoints. The US victory in the space race didn't only grant international prestige, it spurred a technology boom. Many of the innovations we take for granted today, such as satellite communications, advances in computing, and even the precursors to the internet, were propelled forward by NASA's Apollo program and related defense initiatives. But what if the US didn't experience this monumental success? Would the momentum for technological advances have slowed? One possibility is that the United States, embarrassed by the Soviet Union's moon landing, could have doubled down on funding and research to regain its lead. In this world, we might see an even faster push toward missions to Mars, or further technological competition spanning decades. On the other hand, it's possible that a Soviet victory could have demoralized the US, dampening public enthusiasm and disrupting government funding for space research. The spark that ignited Silicon Valley, personal computing, and other groundbreaking advancements might have burned less brightly. Additionally, the brain drain of international scientists moving to the United States during the Cold War could have shifted. A Soviet victory might have redirected that talent toward Moscow, altering the global hubs for scientific and technological innovation. Beyond science, Soviet dominance in space could shape the broader geopolitical scene. With the USSR ahead technologically, the sense of an imminent existential threat might have been heightened in the West. Space could have become a more militarized frontier in this alternate timeline. The prospect of satellites as weapons platforms and space stations as orbital fortresses might have transformed space progress from exploration into a battlefield. The already tense relationship between the USA and USSR could have deteriorated into outright aggression, increasing the risk of conflict both in orbit and on Earth. Economically, the world might have seen parallel shifts. The Soviet Union's success could have given credence to the viability of planned economies, influencing developing nations to adopt socialist models. Alternatively, if space militarization escalated costs, both superpowers might have exhausted themselves in an arms race that bankrupted their governments, altering the course of global economics altogether. Had the Soviets established dominance by landing on the moon and perhaps building a lunar base, the vision for human space exploration might look very different today. Soviet ideology encouraged the idea of collectivism, working for a greater shared purpose. With this in mind, some speculate that the USSR's vision for space might have prioritized communal missions, emphasizing permanent outposts on the moon or Mars. Could humanity be colonizing Mars by now? It's possible that Soviet focus on long-term space habitation could have pushed us further into the solar system. However, if Cold War tensions remain strong, the opposite could also be true. Rivalries might prevent nations from working together, stunting global progress into deeper space ventures. Additionally, if space was treated increasingly as a battleground instead of a frontier for exploration, it's likely that budgets would shift toward military uses, neglecting peaceful exploration entirely. Human progress in space might have ground to a halt in the midst of militaristic tensions. The cultural and symbolic impact of such an alternate history cannot be understated. Space exploration is not just about science. It's a reflection of human ambition, unity, and hope. Thus, a Soviet victory might have changed the way societies view science and their future. The USSR's socialist narrative would have painted this triumph as a victory for the working class and central planning. In a world seeing the hammer and sickle fly high, might the lure of communism have seemed more attractive to citizens of capitalist nations? Alternatively, might skepticism toward government control have grown more intense? Additionally, the legacy of humanity as pioneers of the cosmos, often touted by the American-led Apollo missions, might carry a different tone under Soviet leadership. The story of space exploration could have been one of collectivism, emphasizing teamwork and shared goals. Whether this inspires greater unity on Earth or intensifies existing divides between competing ideologies is uncertain. But the cultural ripple effects would resonate for decades. Of course, not all roads lead to progress. A Soviet-dominated space narrative could carry significant risks. The militarization of the cosmos could propel the Cold War into dangerous new territory. Tensions in space might worsen the already fragile balance back on Earth. In the worst-case scenario, conflict in orbit could spiral into terrestrial warfare. On the other hand, there's a lesson to be learned from the real history of the space race. While competition drove innovation in the 1960s, collaboration eventually emerged. Initiatives like the Apollo-Soyuz test project, the International Space Station, ISS, and modern multinational efforts to explore Mars show that great things are achieved when nations work together. The speculative question of a Soviet victory serves as a reminder of the possibilities lost when rivalry overshadows cooperation. So, what do you think? Would Soviet primacy in the space race have spurred humanity to greater heights or led us down a darker path of division and conflict? Could we be living on Mars by now, or might we have narrowly avoided catastrophic militarization in space? These alternate histories are a fascinating lens through which to explore both past and future. They give us an opportunity to reflect on the consequences of technological rivalries and how they shape human progress. The space race as we know it helped humanity achieve incredible milestones. But could the stars have told a different story? We leave you with this open-ended question. Asterisk. Would our world today be better or worse if the Soviet Union had won the space race? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Would the promise of socialism written in the stars have inspired hope? Or would humanity have risked falling apart under intensified rivalry? Let's explore this alternate history together. Who knows what we might uncover? Like and subscribe for more from History Twist.